Welcome to the For Fresno podcast. My name is Gordon, and this is a podcast about what the church is for, not what the church is against. And you can check out all our podcasts at forfresno.com. Today, we have the executive director for the Fresno Police Chaplaincy, Rodney Lowery. Rodney served in law enforcement for many, many years and retired from the Fresno Police Department in the year 2000. Over the years, he has had opportunities to work with undercover, narcotics, SWAT, K-9, and Violent Crime Suppression Unit. He holds a BA in Bible and Theology, an MDiv, and is working toward a PsyD. Rodney has a unique experience of viewing the needs of our city from a ministry perspective, as well as through the lens of a law enforcement officer. Reconciling those views has led him to believe that no organization has greater impact on the city than the Fresno Police Department. Well, let's jump in and hear about the Fresno Police Chaplaincy with Rodney Lowery. Welcome to For Fresno. My name is Gordon, and today we got another wonderful guest. We have the executive director of the Fresno Police Chaplaincy, Rodney Lowery. Rodney, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, pleasure to talk to you today. So let's talk a little bit. You're the executive director of the Police Chaplaincy here in Fresno. What does that look like? I'm sure there's some people out there that are going to be curious about this conversation and what you do and how do you help and support the police?
Absolutely. The chaplaincy for the Fresno Police Department really has grown over the last several years, and we've kind of moved or expanded beyond a traditional role of a chaplain. And I think it's easiest probably to say that a chaplain is kind of the pastor at large for the unchurched.
Gotcha. So is that within the police department, or even do you work with them to reach outside in the communities in that way?
You know, actually both. The chaplaincy started in the mid 80s with the Fresno Police Department, and originally the intent was to be that counselor, spiritual counselor for Fresno PD personnel, but that role just kind of grew into opportunities within the community, and has since then even expanded more, dealing with from youth, primary ages through adolescence. We saw an opportunity and recognized that everyone in the city who is hurting or finds themselves in a situation beyond their ability to cope, you know, they pick up the phone and they call 911. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's just such an awesome opportunity to minister to people.
Yeah.
You know, when the whole city is calling, giving you their name, their phone number, and their address and saying, hey, I need help. And fortunately, the police department that I work for, they understand that, you know, we can't always solve crises with handcuffs, ticket books, that most of the calls for service that come in, they're relational, right? Yeah. It's one person not being able to get along with another one. So with it, the chaplaincy has found a niche and an opportunity to be extremely relevant in a very difficult setting, and a difficult time in the world, really.
Yeah, and that's very true. Now, just to ask a little bit more questions on what you guys do, you said it started in the 1980s, and it was focusing on counseling with the police. Now, you counsel police officers. You also counsel the community. Do you counsel firemen and hospitals, or how widespread do you go? And then what are some of those details that you do with them? So, do you meet with groups? Do you meet one-on-one, just on phone calls? What are some of those things as well?
You know, within the police department, we'll have Bible studies with PD personnel. We'll be dispatched to any critical incident, say there's a loss of life, or perhaps there's a notification that needs to be made within our community. We active with ride-alongs with our police personnel, just to be that encouraging or that listening ear, because policing is changing so quickly. Yes. The industry of law enforcement and the weightiness of trying to do the job with the scrutiny that's currently going on nationwide. You know, whether that's fair or unfair, depending on what particular event we're talking about. But the job is becoming increasingly complex, and I see that it's wearing on our personnel.
Yeah, I bet it is. And so what does your week look like then? You said you're doing Bible studies and you do ride-alongs. I mean, do you have another job? Is the chaplaincy volunteer? Is it full-time? Is it part-time? What does that look like as far as the structure, and what's a daily week, maybe, or a day look like?
Yeah, absolutely. The chaplain program consists of actually about 15 paid staff and about 100 volunteers.
Oh, wow.
So that alone, it's a full-time, probably a more than a full-time job for me to run the chaplain program, because again, we've branched out other programs within the chaplaincy. For example, we recognize that many of the problems that our society and our young people face are driven by early childhood trauma. Whether that's a loss, family member, maybe an incarcerated parent, or victimization. We did a study a few years ago, and in a study looking at what type of crimes are occurring in Fresno against children, we ran across a statistic that showed that 75% of kids who are incarcerated had been victimized.
Oh, wow.
And about 93% of kids who are incarcerated had some sort of adverse experience in their life, a loss of a loved one, maybe an arrest of a parent, and just starting to understand those dynamics is helping us change the question. For the last 100 years in law enforcement, my background is law enforcement. I'm retired with Fresno Police Department. I was part of several units in the 80s and the 90s, from K9, because I was always the slowest runner out of the department, and Violent Crime Suppression Unit in the 90s, and then about 5 or 6 years as a team member for the Fresno Police Department SWAT team.
Wow.
Our question was always, when someone did something outside of society norms, was, what's wrong with you? Why would you do something like that? And that question, always led to the trajectory of incarceration. And I think what we're learning now is a better question would be, what happened to you? Tell me your story. So to mitigate some of those issues, some programs were developed within the police chaplaincy. We, and this is unfortunately a little known fact, that we actually have a program called RISE, Resilience in Student Education. That's our early primary prevention. And what that program is about, and hopefully I've got some listeners that would be eager to participate now that we're moving through COVID. Things are going to get back to normal. We partner with Fresno Unified, and we put trained volunteers in first grade classrooms in Fresno, teaching resilient characteristics, self-efficacy, empathy, emotional regulation. We believe that if a child knows their value, right, and understands the value of their neighbor, that child sitting next to them, that they won't be a victim, they won't be a suspect down the road. So that program started about 6 years ago with 3 pilot schools. And since then, we've actually moved into, I think, close to 40 Fresno Unified schools, elementary schools, right? And we're partnered with Washington Union.
Oh, cool.
Fresno Unified would like us to be in all 64 elementary schools, and have asked us to actually develop curriculum for 2nd and 3rd grade. We teach on average to about 4,000 children per week for 34 of the 36 school weeks during class time in the classroom. What an awesome opportunity, and really the favor of God that has opened that door to allow us to make that impact. And so we're looking for volunteers for that particular program.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there might be some thoughts out there. So you've chosen first grade. What is that, 6-year-olds?
They're about 5, 6 years old.
So what's the response on that? I mean, some people might overlook that and be like, well, how are they really identifying or with empathy? Do they know what that is at that age? What are your results?
The results are fantastic. We do a pre and post test for, understanding. Obviously we're not using that terminology with the kids, but that old adage, proof's in the pudding, right? Okay. So in December, one of our storybooks, we use children's literature to convey the principles that we're teaching.
Okay.
Is a teddy bear book where a child's favorite toy is a teddy bear, and that child loses that teddy bear, and goes through some difficult times trying to adjust and recover from that loss. And then as the story reads on, the child sees a homeless person in the park while he's out there enjoying it with his family, and notices that the homeless person has his teddy bear. And he goes over there and approaches that homeless person and sees the attachment now that the homeless person has for this teddy bear, and knows that this is a comforting thing for that person. Well, at the end of the story, and because it's Christmas time, we then deliver about 4,000 teddy bears to all the first graders. And one of the volunteers ran into a child that she had actually taught the year before, and she just happened to ask, "Hey, do you still have your teddy bear?" And the child said, "No, I'm sorry. My grandpa died, and my grandmother was having, she was just hurting. And so I gave it to her."
Wow. So
can we communicate empathy and self-efficacy? Absolutely, we can, really at any age. So we've seen the growth. Fresno Unified has seen the growth. We actually do evaluations for the program at the end of each year. And, I'd love to share the comments by Fresno Unified, the staff, the teachers, and the principals about how impactful and behavior changing that they see in the classroom.
That's amazing. That's really great. So you said you teach 4,000 kids a week. Is it an after school thing or before school, or is there like a lunch? Like when does this happen?
During class time.
Oh, during class time.
Yeah.
So the volunteers are able to come during class time and help out with all that. Wow. That's great. What a great commitment.
It is. It's awesome. The partnership with Fresno Unified, I mean, I couldn't be more pleased. And, there's another benefit, because my volunteers, of course, there's training to go along with it. But part of the uniform is, a pullover with the it's called the RISE program. You're a resiliency coach, but you have the Fresno Police Department insignia or badge on your shirt. So what we see is a kind of a bridging of understanding and relationships between parents and young children on the campus, because they start to understand that that's an arm or an outreach of the Fresno Police Department.
Right. No, that's great. And and the reputation, like what you're saying, and how that comes across is a lot more positive. And I would imagine that there is a greater response, and especially in these times where if people are unsure about how the police contribute and what the motives are, that they're doing some great things in our city. And that's just one of the prime examples.
Right. Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. I ask this every show, and I just want to ask, what are you for?
What am I for? I think easiest said is I'm for healthy children, physically, emotionally. We live in a city, unfortunately, that can be very, very dark. And probably your viewers don't understand the volume of calls for service that are impacting our children. Fresno Police Department responds to about 1,500 to 2,000 events per day. Wow. And yeah, it's incredible. And out of those events, we'll see anywhere from 40 to 50 calls involving children in trauma. We average about 500 to 700 events per month involving some sort of trauma impacting a child.
Wow.
So what we do know is, and there's something that we talked about earlier, is untreated trauma leads to, depression, at-risk behavior,
right,
addictions, and then eventually incarceration.
Yeah.
So I am for healthy children in this city of Fresno, and I believe one way of impacting that is early intervention on these calls involving children and trauma, teaching those resilient skills as early as we can, because we know that life's challenging and they're going to go through difficult times, and we've got to build our future generation with a skill set to handle those things.
Yeah. I think that's amazing, because you're right with those stats, and you're right. I didn't know that. I'm sure the audience doesn't know that out there. And it's one of those things where I've heard that children often develop, what am I trying to say here? They often develop their behavior and their basic character and behavior by age 7. And so instilling them at a young age, these tools that you're talking about, like empathy and such, about the resiliency, is amazing, because it's a lot harder to switch that when you're an adult. When you've had 20, 30 years of acting a certain way, you can't really just 180 degrees shift.
You can't, and to be completely transparent, I'm a product of that. Some things that happened when I was a young person changed my thinking patterns. And, I consider myself fairly educated. I've got a wonderful support system, a beautiful wife of almost 34 years, great kids, great job. And it's those thinking patterns that challenge me today at 55 years old. And it makes total sense. So what I want the church to know and understand, God being really the first psychologist, said in his word, so a man thinks in his heart he is. And what he's talking about is really the thinking patterns that are developed, are acted out in our daily lives through behavior. Those are the things that we have to engage as the church. I mean, I think we can look around at our world and understand that our thinking patterns are skewed and they're all over the place, but they're simply not in line with the truth. Mm-hmm. So the sooner that we can get to those young people and work with their thinking patterns. I believe that God has called me, using my experience in law enforcement and my partnership with the Fresno Police Department, to mitigate some of those obstacles that kids find themselves going through in early life that cause issues reaching across, right? I mean, victimization makes it more difficult to believe that there's a loving God out there when I've been treated this way and neglected and harmed, and nobody's come along to show me any different. And that's really the opportunity the church has through these calls for service, right? If everyone who is hurting is calling Fresno PD, and asking for help. What a wonderful place for the church to partner, because Fresno PD is not the answer in and of themselves. It's really long-term relationships.
Yeah. Well, that's really encouraging to hear that from you, especially as the executive director, knowing that your influence is probably not just reaching your staff and your volunteers, but hundreds and thousands of people. Because we do need that. We do need those relationships. And I'm curious, because of the trauma, are you guys working on any type of, or maybe you already have, and I just don't know it, but the connection with families and parents? And, if the kid's having the trauma, then obviously the trauma starts in the home. Is there a way to get there and help influence that positively, or what do you think about that?
Wow, what a great segue question right into what we're doing. It's almost like it was rehearsed. Yeah, absolutely. So that was our early primary prevention. And then our intervention program is called STELL, Stop Teen Exploitation and Liberate Through Hope. What my staff does is we go through all the calls involving runaways. And unfortunately, the city of Fresno has about 3,000 runaways per year. And what many people don't know is that the city of Fresno also has about 18,000 gang members just in our city who, quite frankly, are preying upon these young kids. It's their job to influence these kids because, it's business, quite frankly. It's gang expansion, it's human trafficking, it's drug sales.
Wow.
So we reach out into the families, trying to determine, what's the catalyst behind the relational rift? How do we help or come alongside and repair that? We offer teen mentoring classes. We offer individual and group. So trying to bring these teens into a development process. And then beyond that, we recognized a few years ago, as we were reaching out into the lives of these young people, that there was so much trauma that was causing much of the relational incidents. And so we knew that we had to try to get the family and those kids into clinical counseling. And that just presented a problem. Unfortunately, there are not enough counselors in the city of Fresno, backlogged. Many of the kids and families that we came across were either underinsured or no insurance.
I see, yeah.
So we actually, this has been about 18 months to 2 years ago, we just asked the question, and it was one of those big God questions. What if, right? Do we have to continue to do things in the box, or can we ask those tough questions and ask God, can the Fresno Police Chaplaincy get into mental health? Because we see a need, and we feel like we could be relevant and fill that niche. So about 18 months ago, we launched a separate nonprofit that is powered by the Fresno Police Chaplaincy called the Resiliency Center. And what that does is it partners with the Fresno Police Department, and those calls for service that come in through Fresno PD, they're mined by Fresno PD, and they look for any calls involving children and trauma. Those calls are pulled out 4 o'clock in the morning and sent to the Resiliency Center. And then case managers, when they come in, they engage those families. They get on the phone and say, hey, officer and so was out there last night. They want us to follow up with you. Here's what we can do for you. Here's what we offer. Can we get you in to see one of our our licensed clinical counselors? Yeah. And from that question, hey God, what if? We're now seeing about 120 kids and family members per week. And
what, per week?
Per week. Yeah, it's just so awesome. We were in the upstairs portion of the chaplaincy off of Fulton. And within a few short months, we outgrew it. So now we are on the city center campus, which is owned by Fresno Mission. And we occupy about 7,000 square feet.
Wow.
Where you can see kids and families getting the service that they would not get. About 40% of our clients is pro bono. It is a horrible business plan, but it's an awesome kingdom plan.
Yeah.
So and then the added benefit, once word started getting out what we were doing with the clients that the officers dealt with, we started seeing some changes within the agency. Officers would go out to a scene and they get in the business because they want to help.
Yeah.
That's really the catalyst for an officer joining the ranks is, I want to help people. And then they find that there's not enough time, there's no resources, and the tools of the trade, unless they can handcuff somebody, they can be ineffective. Mm. Now, when they come across those calls, they know that the Resiliency Center will follow up.
Yeah.
So that circuit is complete, right? And for the family, that circuit is complete. Now, we're hearing, hey, thank goodness that the Resiliency Center is there to pick up some of the pieces.
Right.
And then we're also seeing Fresno PD personnel call and say, hey, I've heard about the Resiliency Center. I want to come in. I want to talk.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So many benefits. Soon we'll be coming out with an app that Fresno PD and Fire will hopefully be able to just download. And anytime they come across an event where they just see a family in need, they put an event number that we can search, and then we can follow up with that family. So it's turned into a proactive change in policing or law enforcement, along with mental health.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a perfect solution. It sounds like you guys are really getting it together. And I'm super impressed just hearing about that. That's really, really good news and really encouraging.
It's definitely a God thing.
Yeah.
It really is. He's just given us such favor and opened the door and opportunities. It's I've been in the middle of it for 14 years now, and daily I'm amazed what he's allowed us to do.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this has been a great conversation. We've talked about a lot, and I want to ask if people want to get involved with the chaplaincy, if they want to volunteer, or become a chaplain, or help with kids, what are some ways that we can get involved, or what would you suggest?
So first, I'll give you a couple of phone numbers. The Fresno Police Chaplaincy phone number is 621-2120. And then the Resiliency Center is 621-2121. I would encourage any and all listeners to go to FresnoPDChaplaincy.org and pull up our website. Move through the different programs. The Resiliency Center is on there as part of that site. And we desperately need the church to come out and volunteer. We need support. We're a nonprofit. This is not a city-run program. These problems are a City of Fresno problem. And the answer, quite frankly, is the church. It's the largest organization able to do the most. But we need you in the service and the volunteer. And I can guarantee you that the work is tough. There's seemingly no end in sight. But we have a promise that God's word never returns void. Mm-hmm. And every time and each time you reach out and communicate the truth of the gospel, you can rest assured that you've had an impact on a young life.
Yeah.
And again, everyone is calling Fresno PD. Let's do something different. let's work together and change the trajectory for our city.
Awesome. And just to reiterate that, the FresnoPDChaplaincy.org, that's the way we can also contact you through a sign up or an email, as in addition to those phone numbers, correct?
Yes, we need coaches in the schools. We need mentors for our adolescents. We could use help in the Resiliency Center, calling these families, moving through all the calls, because there are so many. And what an awesome opportunity to communicate God's love when somebody's going through a terrible issue in their life and they have no idea where to turn.
Yeah.
Who to reach out to. And because the love of God is expressed in a phone call, you can be a part of that.
Right. Well, that's amazing. Well, Rodney, we've talked about a lot. I just wanted to give you the platform for 60 seconds. If we missed something, or if you thought of something that you want to share with our audience, what's something that you would want to tell them?
I think I would just encourage them to not get caught up in the times, not get caught up in the negativity that's, presented every time you turn on the news channel, or, you're watching TV and it just seems to be so ungodly that we build up such a frustration that we just want to turn our backs and throw in the towel. And I'm here to tell you, the darker this world seems to get, the darker it feels within our own city, the more ministry potential is right at our fingertips. And we win in the end.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's encouraging. And to hear you and people that are out there doing the hard work, knowing that it can be done, knowing there's resources out there to get going, and knowing that we're not doing it alone. I mean, like you said, there's 500 churches in this city. There's 100,000 Christians in this city. You said that we're the largest, basically, organization in the city, and we've got a lot of power behind us, not only in what we can do, but the power of God first and foremost. And so, as dark as it may be, and as isolated as we may feel in these times, it's not that way. There's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot more that we can be doing. So.
Absolutely. Potential and good intentions are great, but they won't impact anybody unless we move forward with them.
Right. Awesome. Well, Rodney, thank you so much for being on the show. I learned a lot about what the chaplaincy does, and I hope our audience does out there. Just thank you again for coming on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Great. Well, God bless you, and continue to do great work.
All right. Thanks, man. Have a great weekend.
Wow, that was a surprising conversation. I had no idea of some of the behind the scenes work the Fresno Police Chaplaincy was doing. It's amazing to hear how many people they are reaching, and the fact that it's growing also. I want to thank Rodney for being on the show. Rodney, we just really appreciate it. If you were moved by what Rodney spoke about and want to help the Fresno Police Chaplaincy make a greater impact in our community, you can contact them on their website. That's FresnoPDChaplaincy.org. That's FresnoPDChaplaincy.org. And as always, if you just want to thank our guests, you can send them a digital thank you. You can go to our website at forfresno.com, click on this episode, and let them know how much you appreciate them. And I want to thank our listeners for watching and listening to these podcasts. Please subscribe, like, rate, review, all the things you can do to help us get the word out. We truly appreciate it. Well, next week we have a fantastic conversation with Krista Weens, who is the education coordinator of the Central Valley Justice Coalition. Krista and the Central Valley Justice Coalition team are doing very important work on educating our communities on human trafficking. You don't want to miss this conversation we're going to have next week. And remember, you matter, your impact matters, because you are the church, and we're here to serve our city.